Welcome to today's Corporate Venturing Insider. I'm very happy today to have Sarit from Delek U.S. Sarit, welcome.
Thank you, Nicolas. Happy to be here. It's a joy. It's been some time since we met face-to-face, so looking forward to this fruitful discussion.
Thank you, Sarit. I always like to start with asking the background of people I interview and how they got into corporate venturing.
Yeah, that was an interesting journey for me. Maybe I should start with some background on my education. I did my BA and MA in economics. So I'm pretty much more on the business side of things. And when I started my career, I actually went to management consulting. I think management consulting is a great start because it helps you focus on the fundamentals. You need to very quickly, in a short period of time, understand the business as much as leaders or management within the business, and even to be able to bring external insights. So it forces you to be very particular on data collection, on analysis, on how to integrate and bring different points of view, and how to tackle big problems. So it was a great learning for me at the beginning of the career. I always think about it as a point in time where I was getting my essence of how do you bring value. You need to bring value eventually. And when I finished that interaction, I went in a pretty young age to the VC industry. So I operated within a small, young seed stage VC. And then later on, I was fortunate to be part of a group that also fundraised for a bigger fund. It was a small business administration fund. So it was a cross-border Israel U.S. fund. So I had, I was even before the age of 30 when I started, and ended up on the VC side around the age of 35. So it was a good chunk of years, humbling years, by the way. It was 99, the .com. So at the beginning you thought that you could do everything, but then you face reality and you realize it's not so easy, and you have to deal with a lot of things to really drive value for the fund. So it was a great experience, but I always felt I had some level of glass ceiling. You know, what could you do more? You're at the age of 35, you experience, you had some perspective. And that was the point in time when I decided to jump to operations. As someone that's coming from a financial background, that operated in a VC environment, which is much more easier, as a young mom with 2 young kids, okay, it was a very tough decision for me because I knew it will be painful. I knew it will take a lot out of me, but I felt it's a must. I felt my ability to grow as a person and to give value to the companies, to the portfolio is limited, because I never have done things with my own hands. So I made that decision. I think it was the wisest decision I've made in my career, because it was fun. It was a lot of learning. And I went actually at the age of 35, I got my first CEO position. It was a relatively small company. It was actually an investment company, so my VC background was very relevant. And during my operational time, I actually took this vehicle to be public. So I was a CEO of a public company with all the luxury of managing gazillion stakeholders, you know, from the public to the board, to the portfolio. And this was an incubator company. Just to give some reference, I've had something along the lines of 60 companies that were part of this portfolio. So there was a lot of portfolio management to do, young companies. Some of them you need to close, you need to be facing reality, the sooner the better, to be able to support the others. And from that period in time, I jumped even more to the operational side, and I took an EVP position for a global medical device company, which later on turned into a site management. And I had the luxury to experience a US-based public company. And later on, as part of my BD position, we actually sold the company. So we took the company private, and I was operating under a private equity. So the same company, two different management teams, two different stakeholders. That was fascinating. You can see that how much you are affected also by the interests and how you move from one management team to the other management team with literally the same customer base and challenges. But it gave me a good feeling on what does it mean to manage a technology company, what challenges you have as a CEO, as an executive in a company. And this is where kind of the CVC opportunity came in, and Delek wanted to build a technology investment arm. And I felt it would be nice to bring both my venture background as well as my operational background and tie them together to build the CVC. It was a fascinating journey at Delek as well, because Delek doesn't have an R&D arm. It's much more commercially driven. And I had to go through some, I would say it almost a strategic thinking process with management, with the board. What exactly do we want to achieve out of it?
The why.
The why. In order to structure it right, in order to put things on the table, because CVC is a long journey. It's not always easy. There will be times that we're going to lose money. There will be times that we're going to make money. And I thought it's really important to align expectations. But now we are 6 years after the decision and the formation of the fund, and I enjoy every minute.
Very nice. Thank you, Sarit. I nearly feel like you have nearly all facets of corporate venturing, with incubation, portfolio management, now corporate VC, CEOs who took the company public, private equity management. Okay, there will be a lot of questions, but let's start from the beginning. I really appreciated the economics background combined with the management consultancy. I feel like nearly this is helping you to see companies from first principles. And maybe what is today in your role you use today from that management consultancy experience?
Yes, that's an excellent question. And I think as a corporate VC, we almost have to operate in two worlds in parallel. So one would be the portfolio and the industry, and how do you bring the deal flow, and how do you pick up the right choices. The second one is our corporation, right? We need to make sure that stakeholder management is done properly, that we understand what's going on, what the changes. We normally have, even within the corporation, a lot of managerial changes that affect our activity, our ability to impact the corporate. So I think that the management consulting background actually helped me with both, because when we're doing due diligence, when we're picking up the right companies, there is always this fundamental questions on what's the risk, how do you mitigate the risk, how this fits our corporate synergies, what we promised, we said we will do. So bringing it all together to a cohesive recommendation to be able to drive this, I think I'm relying a lot on some of the best practices that I've been using as a management on the management consulting side. And on the corporate side, it's the same, because my role actually in Delek also incorporates strategy. So I'm heading the CVC, but I'm also in charge of strategy. I think it's a nice combination because it allows you to both impact the strategy from outside perspective that you have. On the other hand, it forces you to also make sure that the CVC is serving the strategic purpose of the organization. So it's a nice combination which fits well Delek. There's no one size fits all. And also in that aspect, I'm using a lot of my management consulting practices in leading the strategy and making sure that both worlds meet in a good place.
Yeah, when you described it, I thought this was such a good start for a career. You start with this kind of holistic view of companies and adding value. But then you did something quite interesting. You went for completely early stage financial VC where you have all the value to create, but it's very early stage. So how was that transition for you?
Tough. When I moved to manage a portfolio, first of all, it was my first position as a CEO. Okay, so it's the first time that you really, it's up to you. You make it or break it. You need to push everybody. You need to make sure that all the stars are aligned, and it's pretty lonely. You're pretty lonely out there. You need to build your audience. You need to build the people that you can trust. And I used a lot of outside advice from veterans in the industry, which I tapped onto knowledge when I wanted to consult on things. And early stage is tough. You don't have a lot of anchors. You need to develop the knowledge around the technology, the market. In many cases, what's challenging is that when you invest in later stage companies, actually the company itself helps you in doing the learning, right? They already gone through so much learning. You tap into their knowledge. You make sure that you tap into additional knowledge. But on the early stage stuff, you normally deal with people that don't fully understand the market fit, the product market fit, and you need to be able to tap into those knowledge bases by yourself and challenge the company. So you have multiple fronts that you're dealing with: the technology, the market, the management, not always a good fit to the next stage. So you need to be very focused. You need to be to confront the problems early on, because otherwise they are only growing. But I think that's what, as a leader, it forces you to grow. It forces you to do what is right. I, by the way, heard TDK CEO video, and he was talking a lot on doing what is right, and I think that the message resonated with me very well.
Yeah, TDK's contribution to society is in the DNA of the company for 88 years and still today vibrant. So it's really exciting actually when you have such a good core values from the mothership that you can completely import into your corporate VC.
Yes, and I learned to appreciate the core values throughout the journey, right? At the beginning, when you are just a financial VC, you don't think about it much. But when you are part of the corporate and you start understanding the core values and how to build a culture and how that affects your even investment criteria, right?
Yes.
So I think that's a luxury that we have on the CVC side, that we do have some more depth in how we think about things.
And it's even more important, I think, because you want to bring this superpower from the mothership to your portfolio, which means that the way you invest, if there is a cultural fit, is going to have a better fit across the portfolio and the mothership. So maybe I'll jump ahead and then I will come back later. But I think it's an important question, which is you've been building the CVC for 6 years. You're building the culture with it. How do you think about culture, both in terms of recruitment of your team, but also engaging with the ecosystem?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and we've been evolving also in terms of the team. We are, by the way, a small team of 4 people, including myself. And we brought people from a technical, I would say, background related to our industry, but people with a lot of passion around business and very open-minded. And it has been very successful for me. So I made a decision to go after the raw talent and market understanding, and to be able to supplement myself and other partners with the VC background. We felt, since this is something that in our mind was easier to supplement, because and it's a lot because of the values. When you want to really get yourself immersed into the corporate, affect people within the corporate, you want to make sure that you have people with background that can absorb that can understand that. I think that there is very different pace that we are operating with in the ecosystem and in the corporate side, and you need to have people that can live in both worlds, right? You need to be competitive on the ecosystem side, so you need to move fast, but on the other hand, you need to appreciate the processes of the organization and know your way and have your core values, in my mind, situated there. So the people that we brought to the team were people that are able to live in both worlds, and we choose to supplement the VC portion ourselves, but take people that have the corporate technology background, but very flexible and very passionate and curious about business.
I want to double click on curious, because it comes up a lot when we talk about corporate venturing. So can you tell me why? Actually, can you tell me why curious, but also how do you interview for curiosity?
Wow, you're touching on a great question, because we just recently made some changes to our core values. It's actually in the process of making, and one of them is curiosity, believe it or not.
I didn't know.
You didn't know that? And our organization, as an organization, decided that curiosity is an important core value. I think it's true for many energy companies, as we are challenged with the transition.
Yep.
That without curiosity, you are stuck a little bit with doing the things you used to do in the past, the best practices, without questioning. And I think we, in the energy sector, we are in a period of time of questioning everything, right? You need the old forms of energy. We will need them for many more years, but you need to start asking the right questions. You need to be curious about what you do. You need to ask yourself what will work economically, right? It's not just the greatest ideas or innovation. They need to be safe. They need to be reliable. And curiosity is a very important attribute in my mind, because it's this passion for the truth. Okay, exactly. It's relentlessly asking and trying to get to the bottom of things. And I think it's a character that some people have. They are curious, they are excited when there is a question or a challenge, and some people get intimidated by it. And to your question on how do you interview for that, I really like to have, after people passing through the first hurdle, we normally have some sort of a case test, a test case that we give to people, and we see how they think. And this is where you really start seeing how someone is thinking and how curious he is, what questions he's asking. And I think that's where I really kind of understand whether someone is curious or not.
Yeah, I think if we think about CVC, it's about trying to understand the future that's not yet there, and how it could disrupt the mothership. And if you're curious, you're more likely to be open to what could become, and therefore try to identify where to invest, where not to invest, and how to guide the mothership. So that's why I ask to double click on curiosity, because I feel like this is one of these key skills that you can't really train, but you can practice a lot.
Yes, and we, by the way, converted. We used to have innovation, and we moved to curiosity, because I think the message is we're not just trying to innovate, but we're trying to really understand what works and what doesn't work. Okay, sometimes innovation perceived as a technological thing, but the question whether it's going to add value, how you really connect the base business with the changes. So you really need to be curious, to believe in something, and then to fight for it.
Yeah. I want to shift gear for the fact that you're in charge of strategy, and you have this opportunity, early access of what the future might be through the CVC. And to me, that feels like a superpower for a role of head of strategy in a company. Can you share maybe some ideas and best practices about how you leverage these insights coming from the CVC into shaping the strategy of the mothership?
Yeah, I think it's a choice that we've made that played out well for us. I think when you are part of a corporate, what happens is that I guess in a big portion of your time you are very much influenced from internal opinions, right? There is a perception on the industry. There is people believe what they are used to. And I think that what's nice about the CVC angle is that on the CVC side, it's almost the other way around. We are pretty much 80% of our time influenced from what's happening outside. I think it's very important that even my goal to myself and the team is to spend most of our time outside, because this is how we bring value. We bring value by having those little sensors in the market, by talking to other CVCs, to other investors, to the companies, and building almost a puzzle, right? A new puzzle that will be connected to the puzzle of our current core business. And I think this perspective is helping us challenge a lot of what we do at the corporate. And it played out very well for us.
So I guess you're agreeing it's like a superpower. It really helps define the strategy.
Yes, it does. And I think that it's always easy for us to do better what we do today. I think the challenge for us, and it's going to be true for many of the companies that are undergoing a transformation, right? It's not a small change. Eventually, and we can debate for hours if it's going to take 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, but eventually we need to undergo a transformation. And I think when you are in this type of an industry that undergoing a transformation, it's extremely important to make sure that you have some significant sensors embedded in the outside environment, because it's going to be hard to do it when you are mostly influenced by old perceptions and your current business.
And I think one thing I find interesting is that your corporate VC in itself is not that expensive. You say it's a team of 4 people, and yet it allows you to have all these sensors into the ecosystem to know what could happen. Could you find a reason why a company of a good size would not have a corporate VC?
It's an excellent question, and I think there's always a debate around it. I haven't been in an organization that doesn't have a debate around it. There is always the tendency. I think, by the way, it's not the expense. I think the challenge, the bigger challenge is the management attention, because if you want to do a corporate VC in the right way, it will take some attention from leadership. and management attention is the most critical thing as we are operating. And there is always this angle of where do I put my next buck? Where do I put my next management attention? What will bring more value? I think it's up to leadership, and I think that people, they need to understand that, especially in the industries that are undergoing a transition. In my mind, it's one of the best tools you may have in your toolbox, right? You have the BD portion, you have a CVC portion, you have internal operational efficiencies which you could apply to evolve. And I think when you're undergoing a transformation, the CVC is a very effective tool. But sometimes you have more conservative organizations that would think much more short term and would not pay significant attention to the longer term.
Yeah. And I think leadership touched on something you said when you started the corporate VC. You spent a lot of time to align expectations. Here, I'm sure you have some best practices or some tips for the audience.
So I want to maybe share with you a story. I remember one of my meetings with my chairman, and I came in and I wanted to put things face value, and I came in and showed the VC statistics. Okay, and the statistics is...
That is brutal.
I wanted to make sure things are on the table, okay?
Yeah.
And when you look on VC statistics, it's not so exciting, especially when the cost of capital in our industry is not low. And I remember this meeting and that day, and when we finished the meeting, he said, okay, Sarit, maybe I was wrong. Maybe we shouldn't do it. And it was a real aha moment, okay?
Yeah.
And I said to him, if you don't feel it will bring value, let's not do it. And this is where we started the honest discussion around the synergies and around what beyond financial return we want to bring to the organization. And I think it brought a very honest discussion, and it helped also me make sure that I really understand what people are expecting from me. And it's changed the whole way of thinking on how to structure it, what value I need to bring. I would say it's harder to bring synergetic value, right? Because you're not dependent on yourself and your small team. You are dependent on the whole organization. You are dependent on other stakeholders to listen, on collaborating in either doing projects within the organization, developing new business lines. So it makes your job much more complicated. And it was important for me also to understand it. Where am I heading? What do I need to do to succeed?
And so what was the goal set at the beginning, 6 years ago?
So the goal was combined. The financial goal was, if I would put it straight up, don't lose money. Okay, there was like, we defined it as a health check. We want to make sure we're doing the right thing. We don't want to lose money. But I think early on we understood that the real value for the organization is the perspective, is the knowledge, and it's to be able to either improve our core business, to have operational efficiencies, or to open new legs for the business. And we started by focusing on improvement of our core business. Remember that it was the first time for Delek to do a CVC. People needed to feel comfortable with this new thing. When you do things that are closer to your core business, people feel more comfortable, they understand it, it's easier to drive decisions. And I would say at the beginning of 21, about 2 years ago, we clearly it was the first shift of the VC to focus more on building a new leg for the business, focusing on the transformational energy transformation part, which is adjacent to our business. But at that time, I think there was already the trust in the team and how we work. And we gained that trust with a lot of hard work that enabled us to do much more adjacent stuff, and to the organization to really trust us in kind of going into new frontiers.
I think it's a golden nugget, because what you did is you spent the first few years delivering on low-hanging fruit maybe, but value to the organization, and your mothership is actually very operational. So I'm sure that Delek U.S. is really focused on executing, and therefore the execution partner you would have are really focused on more short-term than visionary 10 years from now, building trust first. And as you build trust, you can start to have more license to go beyond just the short term.
Yes, and I felt we needed that license. We couldn't have gotten that license if we wouldn't have been operating in a very honest way with the management team, understanding the good, the bad. The first years haven't been easy, right? Even trying to gain operational efficiencies to some extent, when you're coming to people that do this day in, day out, and you're trying to bring new ways of how to do things, there's always a pushback, and it always depends also on leadership. And leadership changes, introduces new challenges, and you have to recalculate how you do things. And but I think the key through all the years of the CVC is to read the room, the outside environment, the inside environment, adapt yourself, ask yourself every time again, how do you bring value? You're not sticking into, I said I'm going to do that, so I'm closing my eyes if things have changed. You remember we went through COVID period, right? Yep. These are meaningful outside changes that make effect on the whole company. And from that perspective, the fact that I do have a seat on the table on the mothership helps me a lot to understand the picture, right? And to be able to adapt to make sure that we bring value.
I think that's another golden nugget, because you have this sense of what's happening, all the disruptions, and you can bring that both to the CVC and to the mothership. And one thing I wanted to ask also is, as you've defined short-term, the more operational improvements of the execution side, and now you're looking a bit beyond, I'm sure you also look at short-term still. How does your KPIs have changed over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the KPIs have always been a mix of financial. We look on TVPI, right, of the portfolio, but also operational. So we used to have, and we still have, the value out of implementations and projects within the company. It used to be much more driven from digital transformation. Now it's much more driven from building basically new projects within the company related to energy transition. So the same principle, just applied on a different area, different timelines, right? When you're trying to build, for example, we are into the journey right now of putting together a pretty big carbon capture project within one of our facilities. This is something that the time horizon is a couple of years, right? So you need to make sure that you apply the right KPI criteria that shows the progress along the way.
And sorry, and on the, actually, I like the idea of the carbon capture. Is that one where you explore many startups, you identify one, you decide to invest, and then you plug it with the mothership as a road mapping? Or is that something you start first with a project and then you may decide to invest?
Yeah, it was evolving, and I think obviously it's a symbiotic relationship. One affects the other, but what we have done when we started looking on energy transition, and this is the adjacent businesses, right? We are learning new areas. We didn't have the expertise internally, but we had to learn. So first of all, we started by mapping the whole potential areas and asking ourselves what would be synergetic to Delek. Okay, so out of and we basically looked on two parameters. We looked on synergy and we looked on business potential. So we wanted to make sure that we have both business potential but also high synergy. And we picked up the few areas that we felt have both business potential and synergy to Delek. Then we started mapping those areas. So if you would take, for example, the carbon capture, this is a huge evolving area, right? We are pretty much learning it alongside the industry, and
like everyone,
it's changing as we go, right? So you need to make sure your sensors are well embedded to understand also the changes. But even within the carbon capture industry, we realized that for us, the point source capture would be the area of focus because we are ourselves a polluter. And we felt that by integrating it to our business, we can both bring value to Delek by reducing our carbon footprint, but also help mature technologies and to be able to eventually support other members and maybe even have a business out of it. So basically picked up a few areas we want to focus on, zoomed in on those areas. We are pretty big on doing landscaping work because to understand an area, we are big believers that we need to landscape. And this is where I think the CVC helps a lot, right? When you are looking into many companies, you are seeing many perspectives, you eventually develop your own opinion on what will work. It could be work for you. It could be, what would eventually, in our case, we believe will be economical. Just to give you another example, Delek it doesn't have those gigantic sites like the big boys, right? So carbon capture in a smaller site versus a big site, you also sometimes need to pick up different technologies to make it efficient, economically efficient. So we had our sweet spot, which we felt there are many people like us, so there is a market potential for that, but we could be an example of someone, a customer, right, a lead customer, and we could test it, and we could prove it, and then if proven right, we may be able to make a business out of it. So it's I would say very similar practices from strategy, right? You build up the strategy, what you're focusing on, then you drill down, you understand the pros and cons, you decide on your path forward within a specific sector. And I think this is where the companies can enjoy as well because we help bring them a perspective. And I think right now what happened is that we even understood that to bring value both to the companies and to the mothership, we are willing to do first of a kind type of deployment, which I think is
big deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah, it's one of the biggest hurdles today. And it's fascinating because we're starting to, once you start, that's the difference in operations, right? Once you start operating and executing on it, you start understanding the real challenges. Okay, when it's on the paper, everything looks nice. And I would even say that some of the things that we are facing right now, there's a lot of discussions on financial support to those first of a kind and how do you really drive the industry. But when you come to execute, you realize that there aren't many people that are willing to take the risk. Okay?
Very few.
You would have maybe loans, but those loans would be, if the technology doesn't work, they want their money back. So the whole structuring, you start facing the reality.
Yep.
And you start mapping who would be the true people that you would pick up to go to the fight with, right?
Yep.
Who are the true people that are willing to risk? I think as an industry, we have to collaborate. Delek will never be able to take, this risk alone. We are willing to take some level of operational risk. We need to have some partners to share the financial risk. We applied for the DOE for some risk sharing. So it's building this ecosystem, which is now more, I would say, on the BD side even. It's a combination of the VC and the BD side ecosystem to make things a reality.
So I think for the audience of entrepreneurs working on energy transformation, you can't understate how important it is to have partners that will help first-of-a-kind solutions. And so I think you being able to help both with the mothership plus DOE and other partners can really make the difference between a company with a great technology but can't quite get it to be financed. And so I think that represents what I think is a CVC done well, when you manage to find this fit where it's valuable for the mothership, and because of the link, the startup is more likely to succeed, and therefore the financial return will also be better. Do you have an example of first-of-a-kind model that took some best practices to make it into deployment?
Yeah, so I don't have yet an examples of finishing the whole process. We are within the process right now, and the goal would be to almost build a portfolio of projects, right? Some of them will fall along the way because this is a huge thing, right? It's a capital investment. We have the PMO group within the organization that is a big partner of ours. And we go through stages to, vet the technology, vet the operational, the engineering side until investment decision is being made. And throughout this process, I think there is a huge learning, because you move from, core technology to seeing it as part of a bigger engineering, and how you integrate those technologies into the site. What does it mean on the capital investment requirement? And how do you lower the risk to make things happen? So we are right now advancing two big opportunities, one of them within the carbon capture space, one of them within the biofuels space, and slowly progressing them into maturity. And it's going to be a long journey. The idea for us at the CVC side would be to build a portfolio of projects relying on our work on the VC side. Some of them will be companies we invested in, some of them will be companies that we just partner with because we identified that's the right opportunity for us. But I think this journey, this joint journey with the companies, ourselves, other stakeholders, is the one that really makes a difference in the industry, that really matures.
Yep. I think one thing you mentioned is long journey, which implies patience. And VC is about patience. Corporate VC should be about patience, but sometimes the mothership are not as patient. How do you manage the timing element of all of this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the one thing that is super critical is the stakeholder management, right? You need to constantly remind people, you need to constantly bring a perspective from the market. I think there's no way around it. Things take time. Okay, I always like to think back. One of my most successful journeys was with the company I invested in. and stayed as a board member for 16 years. Even after I finished, operating as an investor, I stayed as a board member, and we eventually sold it for a very nice sum. But it took 16 years, and people who left along the way didn't enjoy it. So it was a huge success story, but you need to be patient. And you need to go through a lot of hurdles before you enjoy the fruits of your work. I actually think that CVCs are better in that if you compare it to a classical VC, because there is the strategic element. I think we are operating in an environment that people understand the time aspect better than just the financial market metrics.
I think that's also a golden nugget, which is that strategic fit implies that the motivation is going to stay over time. If you're a financial VC, if it doesn't come back well, then you have a temptation to just move to the next topic. But the topic you invest in are the topics your company really want to deliver on.
Yes, and as a leader, I think you also have a commitment, right? You came to the organization, you pitched for something, you have a skin in the game, right? You cannot just move on. You have to make it work. And sometimes the difference between failure and success is how much you fight for things, how much you're open to make changes, to drive hard decisions, to save, the good parts. And I think for us on the CVC side, there is another layer of commitment to make things work, because we have commitment to the broader organization.
I think one thing we didn't mention, but I think it came across as your first few years delivering on short-term execution improvements, is you had the opportunity to build champions inside the organization. Can you maybe share a few best practices? Because when we talk about mothership, it's many, many teams. Some would be suspicious of a CVC, some would be excited about a CVC. How did you work to build champions inside the organization?
It's a very good question, and I think a key one to the success of CVC. I think you really need to identify who would be people that would be champions in the organization. And in conservative organization, it's not simple. You tend to have a lot of conservative people. I always tend to differentiate between organizations that put more weight on the risk and organizations that put more weight on the opportunity, right? It's at some point in time when organization is constantly thinking of the risk, it stops moving. So understanding who would be your champions, and we go back maybe to the beginning of our discussion, it's much about curiosity. It's much about core values of willingness to make mistakes, willingness to ask questions, willingness to take a risk. People that are willing to bet on deployment of technologies are people that are willing to get out of their comfort zone. And I think it's extremely important, and this is the people skill, right? You need to identify the ones that not only just talking, that are willing to do things, that are willing to risk and to take a bet. And there aren't many in the organization. And I can share that, for example, through my journey, even at Delek, I had a great partner that in the COVID period, unfortunately died from COVID. And it was a huge miss, because I felt I went a few steps backwards, because I lost a dear friend and also a stakeholder. So, and even with changes in management within the organization, I didn't realize, even with my background operating in operational companies, how much effect it will have on the CVC. When you have a managerial chain, you almost need to map the organization from the beginning, understand how to work with who you want to work. And sometimes I would give up on companies because I know I don't have the right stakeholders to take it forward. I don't want to waste time when I don't have the right ally.
And it doesn't make sense to invest in a company if you don't have the confidence you can deliver value to them. And so I think this recalibration is something we don't talk about much in CVC, but that is really important to understand. CVC are still fragile because the mothership management change, the strategy change, things can change for the CVC as well. It should.
Yes, and I think we need to be humble, and we need to constantly understand what's happening and adapt. I think that's the key for to be able to succeed. Even if I would look on Delek and what's happening today, and I think I've shared that with you, I would say, without naming it this way, we almost move from a classical CVC to a CVBD type of activity. So we both do the classical stuff, but today we are very focused on how do we build it into a BD and a future opportunity for Delek. And we are collaborating with the different, extensively with a different group of people on the BD side to really enable some of what we do. So in the period of 6 years, we undergone ourselves a change, which I think was something we had to do because we understood the map of what Delek needs.
And I think that leads to a question I wanted to ask, which was, the first few years was improving the core business. 2021, you mentioned this is the time you can look at new legs. How did you sense the timing was right to start shifting? Was it linked to this managerial change, or was it something else?
It's an excellent question. It was a little bit earlier than the managerial change, but when the managerial change came, it even came to be more extreme. So I, to some extent, sensed the change already at the beginning of 21. It was a change in the discourse in the industry. It was a change a little bit in the discourse in the company. I think that there was time that there was more pressure on the transition, and I started feeling it's a real need. It's not just high level. I think the whole maturity of the transition with KPIs starting to come from the board, right? The public market starts to integrate some of those ESG metrics in. Those were kind of the beginnings of those discussions, and being out there and listening and talking, I really sensed, we as a team sensed that. So we started shifting and started bringing new propositions, and it resonated well. So you think of something, right? Then you're asking yourself, okay, how would that look like? You build a new proposition, you test it with the leadership, you have good feedback, and you're saying, okay, let's refine it, let's do it better. And with the new changes in leadership, it came even more extreme. So today, I would say that we are very much focused on investing in things which we could eventually evolve into a project that will be meaningful for them. Okay,
and creating these new legs.
Yes, and this is a strong push also from our leadership, from the CEO, to be able to drive value to the company.
And in a way, that push from the top is not just to the CVC, where you sensed it, but also to the rest of the organization. And that's, I think, why you use the word resonate, is that the leaders inside these business groups will want to be exploring with you, be curious about the future.
Yes, correct. And I think that this is a fascinating challenge for conservative or companies to be able, because you still have a lot of work in the core business, right? You need to operate it safely and reliably. It's a huge undertaking. But in parallel, you need to start learning and getting into new things. And this is a real managerial challenge to know to live in both worlds, right? You have different people leading different aspects, but eventually how to tie it in, how to make everybody committed to both sides, because there will be years that we will have to invest more in the core business. There will be years that we will be willing to do more on adjacent stuff. Understanding that, recognizing when is the right time, how do you manage yourself through the years when maybe the focus is in a different area, but you still want to keep the buildup, right? I think this is the magic. This is the magic of a good operating management team, to be able to absorb and understand everybody's interests for the benefit of the company.
Yes. So you have nearly the perfect context for transitioning to this CVBD. Is there any tips or best practices that you've done in that transition that could help the audience to think about how to augment their CVBD function?
Very good question, and I think that I would mention two things. I think you have to make very strategic decisions. So invest the time to really think through what would be a fit for the organization, and invest the time in getting the alignment around that. Okay, you have your own opinion, but without getting the alignment within the management team, it's going to be hard eventually to pursue. So we invested in that, and we keep investing in that, by the way. It's an evolving process. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is that enabling the internal ecosystem is changing, right? Maybe from very strong collaboration with the areas of the business related to technology and IT, we now very tightly operating with the BD functions, with the PMO functions, the ones that really develop the capital projects. So there are new groups that we are closely collaborating with, and building those relationship and bridge and alignment was a big area of focus, and I think a big driver for success.
And would you say that these partnerships you're creating are facilitated by the fact you have a CVC?
Totally. I think our ability to form an opinion on those new areas, we couldn't have made it without having a CVC. I think you cannot make it just by observing the market. You have to have your feet wet to really understand the essence. And I think our ability to look on different technologies, pick up the right technology. I think, by the way, the portfolio companies are helping us a lot as well, right? They have their own ecosystems. We're tapping into their ecosystems. We're tapping into their relationship. Think about it. We need to build a new value chain, right? If we are building now a carbon capture, right? You need to have offtake agreement. It's a whole new ecosystem. We are tapping into their relationship and knowledge. They are tapping into our relationship and knowledge. So in my mind, it's a very powerful combination.
And I think that's what CVC done well should be, which is value creation on every stakeholders. So I think it's a perfect way to end this interview. Thank you, Sarit, for your time sharing candidly about your journey and also the value you create to all stakeholders. And for the audience, remember that first-of-a-kind approach is possible and facilitated even more so with corporate VCs. Sarit, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, and thank you for this, I think, very important thing that you're doing with these insider interviews. I think archaeology of knowledge is a very important element, and I think those interviews are helping us as an industry to build this archaeology of the CVC knowledge in a very candid, no agenda manner, so people can absorb and pick up what's right for them. So highly appreciate that and happy to contribute.
Thank you very much, Sarit.